Welcome back to the class, guys, and I hope you guys are doing pretty good. So we are in the interview preparation series where we discuss all the legit interview questions which students have faced over a period of time. Now, in today's session, we will be discussing questions from Accenture. The reason for me creating this entire course in a way that you get complete hands-on, complete knowledge on working on automation, programming languages, the CI/CD tools, and all those stuff is so that even if you are not getting the right kind of work in your office, you don't feel that you are not confident enough to change the job. If you're not liking any company, okay, you feel that you are not valued over there, you should change the job as soon as possible. There was a time in my career where, like I was working for one of an organization, Year Maps, I'll probably take a name, it doesn't really matter. And back then, I was having a mentor kind of a guy in my life. He was a manager on a different project, but he said something over a tea break that Jatin, your career is not going to be dependent on anyone or any company. No one can make your career, no one can break your career. The only person who is going to be responsible for your career is going to be you. So if you are not doing good in your career, it is not the job of your company, it's not because of the manager, it's only because of you. Okay? So if you feel that the company is not giving you the right kind of a platform, the projects over there are not really adding the value in your entire career, change the job. Okay? Now, the only thing that I can help you out with is preparing for the interviews fast. And that's the reason we are going to discuss all the interview questions related to this particular company. Now, if you're getting a call from Accenture, chances are you might face these questions. And even if you don't face this particular question from Accenture, some other company will definitely ask these questions because these are the commonly asked interview questions. Is this part clear to everyone? Perfect. So as usual, this particular document will be there in the download section of this particular video. You know what to do. You guys can download that particular file quickly and just go through the questions once. Okay, just go through the list of questions which are there and then I'll start discussing each question. All right, quickly do that part. All right, guys, I hope you have gone through the entire question bank. There are only 5 questions and we will be discussing these 5 questions in detail. Now, the first thing over here, guys, is if you ask me about this particular SDET role, if I'm not wrong, the candidate was having like around 6 to 7 years of experience. Okay. And it was for Pune location. All right. Now, over here, guys, the first question, if you look over here, is difference between static and final keyword in Java. All right. The first question. Now, before we start going through that particular answer, okay, on the next page, I want you guys to take a moment and think of all the things you are aware of static and final. Okay, take a moment, quickly do that part. All right, I hope you just remember some things about static and final keyword. Perfect. Now, we will definitely discuss on those stuff, but the moment you see this particular questions, like static final or what is exception handling, you should start questioning yourself. What all things you are aware of this particular topic. This is what you call as recalling. Okay, the more you try to recall a particular topic, the better you will be able to remember it on a long run. The first question was difference between static and final keyword. It's pretty simple. It's easy peasy. Okay. The next one is how did you integrate your framework with Jenkins? Yeah, this is going to be a very important question. If you ask me, this is important. Okay. If you have studied the Java module thoroughly, you will be able to answer the first question and the third question also, which is exception handling in Java and different exceptions you have faced in your project. Okay. Now, the key ceremonies in Agile methodology and what is your role in them. This is kind of a fresher, like candidate, like someone who has just been getting started. So anyways, if they ask about Agile methodologies, what are the various meetings, okay, the ceremonies that happens in your Agile Scrum development, all those things we need to discuss those things off over here. And the last one, again, the question number 5, guys, write a program to count the total characters in a string without using a dot length method. All right. So we have to count the total number of characters in the string, but we are not supposed to use this dot length method. Again, this particular question, guys, comes from our logic building module itself. This stuff, right? A lot of time people say that they are not confident for the coding rounds and all. If you study the logic building correctly, you will be able to solve most of the coding related questions. Is this part clear? So these are the 5 questions that we will be discussing in today's session. All right. Now, as usual, there is a rule of this interview preparation module. You are only supposed to watch this particular video when you are fresh. Second, you are having your tea, coffee with you, because this is going to be a very lengthy session. And the third thing over here is, guys, you're not supposed to have any kind of a distraction next to you. So if you have your mobile phone or something, just keep it on a silent mode or just keep it in the other room so that you only focus on these 5 questions. Is this part clear to everyone? Because by the end of this particular session, my goal is you should be able to answer all these 5 questions whenever and wherever they are asked. Is this part clear to everyone? Perfect. So if possible, take a printout of this particular document. It's going to be very useful in this session. Along with that, have your notebook and pen ready because you want to make a lot of notes. All right. So let's get started now. Now, guys, the first question which have been asked to us is difference between static and final keyword in Java. Now, wait, before you start reading the answer over there, first your job is you should try to answer it in your own words. Can you do that? Okay. Let's do a quick thought revision on what is the difference between static and final. Check the difference. What do you know about static keyword? Okay, let's try to just write these things in our own words. You guys write it in your notebook. I'll start writing over here. Okay, so when we are talking about static keyword, guys, okay, static keyword. Static keyword is always going to refer to what? It is always going to refer to memory. Okay. The next point over here, guys, static keyword is applicable at how many places? Can I make a variable static? The answer is yes. Can I make a method static? The answer is yes. Can I make a class static? The answer is yes. Can I have static block? The answer is yes. What else can be static? I can have static imports coming into picture. Right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Static keyword will be applicable at 5 places. Now, what is the use case of static? Okay, when you're talking about static, guys, any variable, any method, okay, any block, any class which you make static, do they belong to an object? No, they don't belong to an object. Okay, so static variables, static methods are always going to be shared across all the objects of the same class. So if there is going to be an information, a data which I want to share across multiple objects of same class, then I have to make it static. Clear? Now you'll be like, what information can be static? Let's say this is my employee, this is my employee, this is my employee. So all the employees have one information which can be constant, that is company name. So company name is always going to be a data which has to be shared across all the objects. So over here we can say that company name is going to be static. The moment you make a variable static, it does not belong to object, it belongs to a class. And hence, your static variable, static method are basically pure class entities. Whereas, your instance variable, right, name, your employee ID, right, they are related to an object. Instance variable are going to be created when an object comes into picture, when a constructor is called. So constructor is always going to be associated with objects. Whereas static variables, static method, static block, they all are associated to a class. So when the class loader loads the class in memory, which memory? Static variables are going to be created inside which memory space? Please remember this particular point, that static variables, static methods, static class, static block, they all are going to be loaded in your method area. Okay, it's also called as meta area. Okay, this is just the information. We have studied all these things. Okay, that's the reason, like I'm just jotting my thoughts out over here, right? Now, this is all about your static keyword. Okay, static keyword is going to be applicable at 5 places. It is associated with your memory. Okay, whenever you create a static variable, static method, they will be loaded in your method area or meta area. Okay, your static variable, static method, static block, they all are pure class entities, meaning they are associated with a class, not with an object. What is going to be associated with an object? Your instance variable. Clear? So instance variable will always be created whenever an object is created, meaning whenever a constructor is called, your objects will be created and your instance variable will be created. Inside which memory space instance variable are created? Instance variable are always going to be created in your heap memory. Please make a note of this particular point. Perfect? Yes or no? Great. Now, the next thing that comes into picture is, let's talk about your final variable also. Okay. Final keyword. My bad. Final keyword. Final keyword is going to be associated at 3 places. I can make a variable as final. I can make a method as final. I can make a class as final. What happens when you make a variable as final? Constant. It's a read only variable, meaning I cannot update the value. Updation is not possible. Reading the value is possible. Clear? Method. What happens when you make a method as final? Yes. When you make a method as final, you cannot override the final method in child class. Okay. You cannot override the final method in child class. If I have to mark a particular method as final, I will be doing it in the parent class because I don't want to do method overriding. Method overriding basically means what? There will be 2 classes, parent class and child class. And they both will be having the same method name, but the implementation, the code is going to be different. Is this part clear to everyone? The code over there will be different. So if you create the reference of parent and you create object of child, and when I say p.m1, overriding happens. What happens? Overriding happens. Over here, Java, instead of calling the parent class M1 methods, calls the M1 method from the child class. Why? Because Java looks at whose object is created and not whose reference is created. Okay. So when I say p.m1, M1 is going to be called from the child class and not from the parent class. Is this part clear to everyone? Okay. I can also make classes as final. Okay. This is the most simplest thing. When I say a class is going to be final, which classes are going to be final? Okay. Your ultimate child classes will be final class. Meaning, if C is not going to have a child in future, okay, if this child class C is not going to have any further inheritance coming into picture, then I have to mark this particular class as final class. Okay. Parent classes. Who is the parent of C? P. P class is also going to be marked with a special keyword called abstract class. parent classes are always marked with abstract keyword. Child classes, the ultimate child class is always going to be marked with final keyword. Is this part clear? So when you make a particular class as final, you restrict that it is going to become parent in future. Okay, that particular class cannot become a parent class in future. And the second thing is, you also give a little bit information whose object needs to be created. If you observe carefully, I am creating the object of child class. I am creating the object of child class, right? So we always create object of final classes. Okay. Objects are always going to be created of final classes. Acha, there's one more important thing. See, if a variable is going to be final, meaning it is going to be a read-only variable. If a variable becomes a final variable, most of the time, because it is a read-only variable, you will say that that particular variable is also going to be static in nature. That's the reason whenever you are creating any read-only variable in Java, you say it is public, or let's say private, static, whatever you want to say, public, static, final, integer, variable name will be written in uppercasing equal to 10. So when you say it is a read-only variable, it is a constant, okay, a final variable makes it a read-only variable, but for better memory efficiency, okay, I want to make it a static variable also. Is this part clear to everyone? Okay. Only because the variable is final, I'm making it static. A lot of time what happens, people assumes that static variables are going to be constant. No, 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 no. The variable is constant because of final keyword. Okay. And we are using static keyword over there so that it is a read-only variable. I don't need a lot of memory, right? I don't need to keep on creating this variable again and again, again and again. That's the reason for all your read-only variable, we only occupy one memory space, and for that, we always mark it with static keyword. Is this part clear to everyone? Perfect. Great. Now let's move on to the next part of the question. Now another place that you will be using your static keyword, guys, is going to be a factory method pattern. Now over here, guys, basically your static factory method provides a method to create objects without exposing the instantiation logic to the client. Okay. Now for you guys, I have created this particular snippet so that you can remember where exactly you need to use the factory pattern in your automation framework. See, this is all about, like interview preparation. Whatever you are going to say, the moment you say that you are going to use factory pattern in your automation framework, they will ask where you have used it, right? So don't mug up things. Instead of that, you understand that why you are creating, what is the benefit you are having and all those stuff. See guys, factory pattern, right? You can use factory pattern at a lot of places. One of the place in your automation framework is browser factory. Now don't worry about the code. First understand. See, factory means what? Factory means a place where things are going to be created. If you go to ice cream factory, what are you going to find over there? Ice cream. Not only just ice cream. You will find multiple flavors of ice cream, right? If you go to a toy factory is going to create toys, okay, for all the age groups, okay, from car to robot to, like dolls to, like anime characters and all those things. So you will technically find a lot of different toys, a lot of different varieties which are going to come into picture. When you're working in automation framework and you're technically automating a web application, you will be working with different browsers, right? You will be working with Chrome browser, you will be working with your Edge, Firefox, Opera, I don't know, so on and so forth. So over here, guys, what I've done is I have created an enum which talks about the different types of browser my automation framework can support. I can have a Chrome, Firefox and Edge browser coming into picture. Now, the next thing what I've done is I have created a class which is called as a driver factory class. Let me zoom in for you guys. over here, there is a static method called get driver. You give me the browser type. You give me the browser type. And what it is going to do, it is going to create the respective objects of those browser. Okay, you're gonna get the respective Chrome driver, Firefox driver, or Edge driver coming into picture. If you pass a illegal value, then you're gonna get a proper message. All right. So this is where you will be using your factory method pattern in your automation framework. And to implement your factory method pattern, you will need to use your static keyword. Is this part clear to everyone? Perfect. Now, just for your usage perspective of your driver factory, here you can see there is a before method which is there. So driver factory, which is my class, this particular class basically has the get driver method, and this get driver method is static. So I don't need to create an object of driver factory, right? And I am just going to pass my browser type. So respective object will be created and it's going to be given back to us, okay, for further testing. Is this part clear? Perfect. Just read this entire stuff. And if you have not made the notes, please make the note for factory method pattern. All right. This is also the second place where you will be using your static keyword. All right. Then you have your builder design pattern. Okay. You have utility classes where you can use your static methods. Okay. Next, move on to the next part, the utility pattern. Now, of course, what is a utility pattern? You created the extend report utility, Excel utility, CSV reader utility, all the different utilities that you are creating in your automation framework, they fall into utility pattern. Now, what is utility pattern? Group related utility method into a single class that doesn't require instantiation. Okay. Did you create the object of CSV utility? No. Did you create an object of extend utility? No. Why? Because all the methods in your utility class are going to be static. Clear? Perfect. As simple as that. So all the methods in the utility class are declared static, so they can be accessed directly using the class name. As simple as that. Now, this is how you're supposed to answer in your interviews. All right. Make sure that your entire answer or whatever you're going to talk about, static keyword or final keyword and all, it's very much in detail and you're using technical terminology only. All right. So for this particular question itself, I have covered all the cross questions that can come into picture. If the interviewers say that, okay, you are talking about singleton design pattern, tell me how exactly singleton design pattern is created, where you have used singleton class. If you're going to talk about factory design pattern, where you have used it, okay, this is the snippet. I have given the name of the class also. If they're going to talk about utility pattern, okay, how exactly utility pattern and where all the utility patterns have been created. All right. Then you have seen the builder design pattern also. I have not spoken about builder design pattern because we have written the code a lot of time. All right. So even in your API automation framework, I have particularly used your builder design pattern. All right. I hope this particular part, the static keyword part, is clear to everyone. Now let's focus on the final keyword. Okay. Final keyword over here, guys, is a pretty simple concept. Final keyword is basically used to define constant or preventing method overriding and inheritance. Yes or no? If I want to make a variable final, okay, the final variable is going to become constant. So final variables are going to be constant. Method overriding. So in your parent class, methods can be final. What happens when you make a method as final? It is going to prevent a method overriding. Inheritance. Okay. So if I am going to mark the child class as final, then what is going to happen? No class can extend No class can extend the child class. Okay, final classes are ultimate child. They cannot become parent. So these are the key features, guys. A final variable can only be assigned once. After initialization, its value cannot be changed. So it's a read-only variable. Methods. A final method cannot be overridden by subclasses, preventing method overriding. Classes. A final class cannot be extended, so no subclass can inherit from it. Now, what is the benefit of final keyword? Okay, why would I use final keyword also? So this is something which most of the folks are not aware of it. People will be aware of these things, but they will not be aware of the benefits and all. And generally now, for your automation framework, or let's say not even just the automation framework, for your project, whenever you're writing code, you should always be aware of the various design patterns where your final keyword is going to come into picture, what advantages it's going to bring into picture. All right. So over here, guys, when you're working with your final keyword, first is immutability. Immutability means what? You cannot perform updation. Okay. So if the final variables are going to be created, they are constant. So constants cannot be updated. So if you want to achieve immutability, mutability means what? Updation, modification is possible. Immutability means updation, modification is not possible. String is what? Your string class in Java is what? It is immutable. Okay, any modification that you are doing in a string is going to create a new string. Okay, so over here, guys, whenever you want immutability, immutability ensures that object cannot be altered once they are created, promoting thread safety. So whenever you want thread safety, you are supposed to use final keyword. Consistency prevents method or classes from being overridden, ensuring the integrity of the pattern. Next, thread safety. In singleton and immutable pattern, final ensures that the shared resources remain consistent. Is this part clear to everyone? Lastly, security. Restricting inheritance or modification adds an extra layer of protection. So if you want to have security, okay, that is restricting inheritance or modification adds an extra layer of protection. So in all these places, final keywords are going to come into picture. Is this part clear to everyone? Perfect. Please go through these points. All right, quickly go through these particular points. All right, guys, I hope you have understood about final keyword and your static keyword. This was actually the first question. Now, over here, guys, we have completed the first question, which was pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The reason that we are revisiting these questions again and again so that you guys become confident for your interviews. Okay. Now, the next question over here, which have been given to us, is pretty simple. How did you integrate? How did you integrate the framework with Jenkins CI? So over here, the interviewer wants to know what are the steps, okay, that you took to set up your Jenkins project. How did you integrate your entire automation framework? What were the different plugins that you have used? So over here, the interviewer wants to understand the exact steps that you have taken to set up the entire automation pipeline in your Jenkins. All right. So if you have solved the Telet assignment, you will understand that part. But what I have done over here, guys, is I have given you the entire diagram, okay, and I have written over here in steps, okay, how exactly the framework was getting executed. So let's quickly go through this particular diagram now. All right, guys, now let's go to the next page and try to read what exactly is written over here for static and final. Okay. Now over here, the first thing is about the static keyword. The static keyword is used for memory management. Do you agree with that? Right? Because when you create a static variable, static variables are only going to have how much memory? One memory. Okay. And it is used to define class level attributes and methods. So if I'm going to make a variable or a method as static, They don't belong to a object, they belong to a class. Yes or no? Now, this is a very important line, guys. Please make a note of this part. When a class is loaded into memory by class loader, so whenever you are trying to load a class into the memory in Java, it is done by what entity or which entity over here? It is going to be done by your class loader. The memory for all its static variable is going to be allocated in the method area, meaning all the static variables and static methods, your static block, your static class, they will be loaded in your method area. Is this part clear to everyone? So your static variable, static method, static block, static class, they will be loaded in the method area. Please make a note of this particular point. Now, a static member, whether it is a variable, method or block, belongs to the class rather than to a specific instance. As obvious, because we know that static variable, static method, static block, static class belongs to a class, not to a object. Okay, only one copy of static variable is shared across all the instance of the class. Okay, so whenever you are going to create a variable as a static variable means only one memory will be allocated. You can access a static variable using class name. Okay, example class name dot member or whatever the variable or method is. As simple as that. You're aware of all these 3 points. Now, the thing is, just because I've spoken about static keyword doesn't mean that the interviewer is going to really get impressed off with those things. You should also remember where you have used static keyword in your project. Okay, whether you are a developer, whether you are an automation engineer, okay, you should know where you have used your static keyword. Okay. So over here, guys, this is the most important part, because I feel if you're going to talk about static keyword, the next follow-up question the interviewer can ask you is, tell me where you have used static keyword in your automation framework. All right. So I've just listed down some important places where you are bound to use your static keyword. So static keyword is basically going to be used in your utility classes. Okay, you create different utilities, right, for your extend report. Now the extend report is not there, but still I'm giving you extend report, or you will use allure report. So we will create different utilities. In utility classes, the methods are always going to be static in nature. All right. There are different design patterns also which will come into picture, and in those design patterns you are bound to use your static keyword. All right. So please remember these design patterns. We have seen them in detail in your Java module, but I'm just giving you a heads up that your design patterns where static keyword comes into picture. Builder design pattern. We have used builder design pattern also. Singleton design pattern, factory design pattern. These are some design patterns where you're bound to use static keyword. Is this part clear to everyone? Please make a note of this particular point. You are going to use static keyword in builder design pattern, singleton design pattern, factory design pattern. Okay, all these 3 design patterns are going to use static keyword. Please remember the structure of each of the design patterns. All right, in interview they will definitely ask, because the moment I start using all these words, now builder design pattern, singleton, factory and all, they will start questioning the topics in detail. Okay, they can ask, what is the purpose of factory? What is the purpose of singleton? What is the purpose of builder design pattern? All right, you might have seen the API automation framework video, right? Over there we have used the builder design pattern. All right. Singleton design pattern, you're going to use it for your database connectivity. Factory design pattern, you're going to use to create a particular object instance, factory of objects, and all those things comes into picture. Now, over here, I think I have already jotted down these points. Extra points you need to remember only for, like all these design patterns. Let's say they ask about singleton design pattern. See, the thing is, if you're looking at from singleton design pattern perspective, what is singleton design pattern? Singleton design pattern basically ensures that only one instance of the class exists and provides a global point of access to it. Okay, meaning whenever you are trying to create an object, let's say C equal to new C. All right, I'm trying to create an object over here of class C. So this is going to create one object. But again, if I write C1 equal to new C, what is going to happen? Another object will be created. I think I've written this wrong. C, something like this. So another object will be created over here. All right. But if I want to ensure that only one object will be created, okay, for a particular class, then I have to introduce singleton design pattern. Okay, the next question that comes into picture is where you are going to use your singleton design pattern. One of the most important place where singleton design pattern comes into picture is database connectivity. Whenever I am trying to connect to a database from my code, I just want to establish one connection. I don't want to keep on establishing connection again and again. All right. So if I want to have only one connection, okay, and the second thing is I want to have a global access point to that particular connection, you are going to create a singleton design pattern class which is going to deal with your database connection. Is this part clear to everyone? Perfect. Now, you can also be asked about another thing, whether you have used synchronized keyword in your project. Because if you start talking about singleton design pattern, one of the most important keyword in singleton design pattern, okay, that comes into picture is basically the synchronized keyword. You see, this is what learning is. We are just discussing static keyword, and whatever you are going to say, okay, about static keyword, let's say you have used different design patterns and all, there is always going to be a follow-up question. All right. And this follow-up questions, okay, is going to be your interview, because now the interviews are going to be very different, guys, like with GPTs, LLM models and all those things coming into picture. The world has evolved. So does your learning has to be. You can't really just go with the basic knowledge and expect that you're going to get a high-end job. That is not going to happen. Clear to everyone? Perfect. So if you're talking about singleton design pattern, again, a very important keyword is going to be introduced over there, which is going to be synchronized keyword. Synchronized keyword. And what is the purpose of synchronized keyword? Synchronized keyword ensures that only one thread can access a block of code or a method at a time, preventing thread interference and ensures thread safety. So the thing is, if you are going to create a singleton design pattern class, okay, or singleton class in simple words, and if you are going to be using this particular singleton class in a multi-threaded environment to ensure thread safety, okay, you are supposed to use the synchronized keyword. You're supposed to use the synchronized keyword. Is this part clear to everyone? Perfect. Please take a moment and read through this first page. Okay, I just want you guys to read to whatever the points that we have discussed so far. All right, I'll also read it along with you guys. So over here, guys, the static keyword is basically used for memory management and used to define class level attributes and methods. When you make a variable and method as static, these attributes are going to be class entities. They belong to a class. Okay, they are the class level entities and they don't belong to objects. Is this part clear? Now, the second thing is, I think they have not written over here the various places where static keyword can be applicable, but I believe you guys know that now. It can be applicable on which places? I can make a variable as static. I can make a method as static. I can have a static block coming into picture. I can have a static class, and I can also have static import coming into picture. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 places you can introduce static keyword. All right. When a class is loaded into the memory by class loader, please make a note of this particular point again. A class is going to be loaded into the memory by class loader. Okay. And all the static variables, static methods, static block, okay, static class, they are going to be loaded into which memory? Meta area, method area. Please make a note of this particular word. A static member, variable, method or block belongs to a class rather than to a specific instance. We know that part. Only one copy of static variable is shared across all the instances of the class. So if I want to share data across all objects, okay, then that particular variable has to be a static variable. Of course, you can access static variable, static method with the help of class name. You don't need to use object reference over there. Where do you use static keyword in your automation framework or in your project? Of course, for utility classes, in your builder design pattern, singleton design pattern, factory design pattern, they use static keyword. Now, when you start talking about these various design patterns, they can also ask, okay, the purpose of each design pattern. So, singleton design pattern ensures that only one instance of the class exists. Only one object can be created of a singleton class and provides a global access point to it. Meaning, I can access a singleton class object anywhere in my project. Okay. Where do you use singleton class or where you're going to use singleton design pattern? Pretty simple, database connectivity. Meaning for your entire code, okay, if I'm trying to connect to a database, I just need to have one connection. All right. Again, the follow-up question, a particularly important question from singleton design pattern is about synchronized keyword. What is the purpose of synchronized keyword in Java? Synchronized keyword basically helps you achieve thread safety. Please make a note of this particular line. Synchronized keyword basically helps you achieve thread safety. Synchronized ensure that only one thread can access the block of code or a method, preventing thread interference and ensure thread safety. Is this part clear to everyone? Yes or no? Now, most of you guys will be thinking, Jatin, let's write a code on singleton class also now, so that we can be at least revise the structure of singleton class. So let's go to Eclipse now, guys, and just practice a little bit of your singleton class structure. Is this part clear? Perfect. Let's launch our Eclipse. Now, guys, the first thing that I'm going to do is inside my interview prep project, I am going to create a package. Let's call this particular package as Accenture. Okay. And over here, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly create a new class. Now, I'll be calling this particular class as DB connector. Okay. Now, what I want over here is I want this particular class to become a singleton class. Now, first understand, when we are talking about singleton class is basically going to have only one object for the entire application. So what I'm going to do first is just going to have a simple constructor over here for you guys, like public DB connector. Okay. And I'm just going to print something, system.out.println, or let's say DB connector. Now, what I want over here, guys, is we're going to create a runner class. This is going to be my runner class. Runner class is going to have your main method, okay, inside it. Now, the next thing, let's try to create an object for DB connector. So I'm going to say DB connector DB1, that is my reference, equal to new DB connector. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to do system.out.println DB1. If I'm going to click on the play button, you will see that definitely it's printing DB connector, because over here your DB connector constructor is going to be called and it's going to print the DB connector for us. And the next thing which is getting printed over here is the hash code of the object. Okay, this is the hash code DB connector @5C8TA962. So think of it like this, that this is the memory, okay, for this particular object. Now what I'm trying to do over here is I'm trying to create another object. Now, over here, let's say this is going to be DB2 and here also this is going to be DB2. Now, DB connector as of now is not a singleton class. Okay, it's not a singleton class. So if I'm going to click on the play button, what is going to have? Two objects will be created. How do I know that two objects are created? Look at the values of the hash code. They are two different values. They are not same value. If it was a single object, both the hash code would have been same, meaning it's only one object which is there in the memory. Right now, there are two objects of DB connector which is there. So my goal over here is that I want to create a singleton class. Is this part clear to everyone? Perfect. So let's go to DB connector and start converting the DB connector into a singleton class. It's a very simple thing. The first rule of singleton class is the constructor is going to be private. So another important interview question that interviewer can ask you, okay, can constructor be private? And the answer is yes. Okay, yes, the constructors can be private. Where will you make your constructor private? In singleton class. Okay, in builder design pattern. So in those design patterns, technically your constructor becomes private. Now what happens when you make a constructor private? What is going to happen when you decide ki Baba, no, I'll make the constructor as private? The moment you make a constructor as private, I cannot create the object outside the class. You see? Yes or no? New DB connector, new DB connector. I am not able to do that. So what is happening over here is, I'm not able to create the object outside the class if the constructor becomes private. Try to read between the lines. I'm not able to create the object outside the class. But can I create the object of the class within DB connector? The answer is yes. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to create a method public void. Okay, I'm going to say create instance, or okay, let's call this create instance only. And what this particular method is going to do, we are going to create the object of DB connector. Now, you see, I'm able to create the object inside the class. Okay. Now, let's say I decide that I'm going to return DB. DB is what? It is going to return me the reference. Okay, reference of the object wherever it is created. So if I'm returning DB, what will be the return type of this particular method? DB connector. Look at the data type. Na? DB ka data type is DB connector. Take this, put it over here. Now, I have this particular method, okay, which is present in the DB connector class, and I want to access this particular method outside of the class. Now, this is an instance method, meaning if I want to access this particular method outside the class, I have to create an object. Now, I cannot create the object outside the class, but I still want to access this particular method without creating the object. So, if I want to access a method without creating an object, this particular method needs to belong to whom? To the class, right? And in order to make a method, a variable, a block, a class belong to a class, what are you going to use over here? Static. Okay? I'm going to make it static. Save it. Now, I don't need to write any of these things. So, I'm not going to create the object outside the class. But I'm going to say DB connector dot create instance. You see, create instance returns me DB connector, and I'm printing it off over here. Same, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put it over here. Now, the question that comes into picture is, Jatin, is this still a singleton class? The answer is no. If I click on the play button, what is going to happen? You will always have two addresses or two hash code coming into picture. So, this is definitely not a singleton class. Singleton class basically means only one object will be created. So, we can fix that also. What I'm going to do is, instead of creating this particular variable over here, I'm going to cut this particular variable and I'm going to create the variable over here. Now, I want that DB connector, the DB variable should have only one memory allocation. One memory allocation. How do you control that? You make it static. So, I'm going to say private static. Okay. And I'm going to initialize it over here. Next, what I'm going to do is, we will first check what is there inside DB. Okay. DB, the database connector, data type is DB connector. DB connector is what? A primitive data type or a non-primitive data type? It's a non-primitive data type. What is the default value for a non-primitive data type? Null. So, I will first check whether DB is having null inside it. Okay. If DB equal to null, meaning what? Meaning no object is created. So go and create an object. Okay. Go and create an object. Else, it's going to return DB. Whatever the object is created, it's going to return me that. Save it. Click on the play button. Okay. So over here, guys, we are trying to create instance. No matter how many times I'm trying to call the create instance method, it is going to give me only one object reference. Meaning this has become a singleton class. Is this part clear to everyone? Quickly write this particular code at your end. Now the thing is, if you would be working in a multi-threaded environment and you want to have thread safety, so you have to synchronize the DB connector class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say synchronized, okay, not like this. I'm just going to say synchronize DB connector dot class, okay. And once this particular class is going to be synchronized, what you will do is you will again do a null check, okay. You again do a null check and then you create this particular object DB equal to new DB connector. Done. Finish. This is going to be your synchronized DB connector. Meaning over here I will be having thread safety coming into picture. So multiple threads, if they are trying to access DB connector class, if they want to connect to the database and all, okay, they cannot intervene, okay, without the previous thread getting completed. So there is going to be a locking, okay. Once one thread access the DB connector, only then the other thread will be able to access this DB connector class. All right. So this piece of code only comes into picture if you want your thread safety in your DB connector class. Is this part clear to everyone? The code remains the same. If I click on the play button, the output is not going to change. You will still have a single instance present over here. All right. This piece of code is going to be important. Here we are doing a double check. Okay. This is important. You are trying to do a double check whether your instance is logged or not. Okay. So over here, we're going to check whether DB is logged. If it is locked, okay, or if it is not initialized, only then I will be creating the DB connector object. Make sense? Quickly write it on. Okay, just practice it off. That's more important. All right. So this is your singleton class. What do you observe in singleton class? The constructor is going to be private. For making sure that it becomes thread safe, you're going to use a synchronized keyword. You're going to synchronize the DB connector class. Okay, you're going to do a double check for the instance. Here also I'm checking whether the instance is null or not. Here also I'm checking whether the DB instance variable, okay, is null or not over here. So you're going to do a double check. You're going to check whether the reference variable, whether the object is created or not. You're going to do a check here also. And over here also, you will do a reference variable check, whether it is storing null or not. If it is storing null, only then the object will be created. Makes sense? All right. So this is the whole stuff over here. For making sure that it is going to be thread safe, you're going to use your synchronized keyword. Is this part clear? Perfect. Great. Now, guys, if you remember during your Telit assignment, we have done the entire setup of your Jenkins on your AWS EC2 instance, right? So if you are able to remember or if you have done that particular setup, great. That's the exact same thing you're supposed to say in the interview. Okay. So over here, just for your revision, guys, we have EC2 instance. And on this particular EC2 instance, guys, we have installed what? First, we installed Java 17. Then we installed Maven, right? These were the two things which was installed on this particular server. Java 17 was installed because the newer version of Jenkins requires Java 17. Is this part clear to everyone? Then you went to the Chrome browser. On your Chrome browser, you went to the Jenkins website. From there, you took the, like the code for or the commands to install Jenkins on your Linux or Ubuntu, right, machine. That's something that we have done. Those were the setups that we have done. Then entire setup got completed. Your Jenkins started as a service. Okay. We have not used generic Java package. Because if you use a generic Java package, Jenkins is not going to run as a service. All right. We install Jenkins properly so that even when we restart Jenkins or we restart the server, automatically your Jenkins will be up and running. You don't have to go to the server and do anything. All right. That's the benefit. Now, on your Jenkins, the next thing that we did was we created a project. And this particular project was your Maven based project. Now, by default, you cannot create Maven based project. Okay, you need to install a plugin. They have not written the name of the plugin over here. That is your Maven. That's your Maven integration plugin. This is a plugin that you're supposed to install on Jenkins if you want to set up a Maven-based project, meaning you are working on a Maven-based project. The framework that we have created is a Maven-based project. So what I've done is I have installed this particular plugin onto my Jenkins, and then we were able to set up the Maven-based project. The next thing that you're supposed to do is you're supposed to give your source code management details. That is, you're going to give the information of your remote repository, the remote repository URL, the credentials. All these things were given to in this particular project. The next thing that came into picture was setting up the cron. Now, in your interview, they can always ask, tell me the format, okay, or explain me how did you set up the cron. All right. So all these things you're supposed to be aware of. We will go to the Jenkins dashboard also in a moment, but please be aware that don't forget, okay, how exactly the cron was done. So whenever you are going to set up a cron, you need to give 5 information. Yes or no? What are the 5 information? The first thing that you're going to give is minutes. Okay. The second thing that you're supposed to give is hour. Now this hour over here is basically 0 to 23, meaning it's a 24-hour clock. Okay. So over here it is written 1729. So my project will be executed on 5:29 p.m. Is this part clear? The next over here is going to be date. Okay, first, second, third, so on and so forth. All those things you're supposed to give. So I'm going to put a star over here. The star basically signifies it's a wild card, which means that I will be running this particular project every single day. Okay, so 1 to 31, every single day it will be executed. Next, you are going to give over here is going to be something which is called as month. Okay, so I want to run on every single month. So I'm going to put a star also. Then I want to run on which days? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? I have to give these. So I have put a star here also. So this particular project is going to run 5:29 p.m. 365 days. Okay. Every single day it is going to run. Is this part clear? You can configure to run it on Monday to Friday also by just putting a 1-5, 1 to 5. Okay, like this. So it's only going to run from Monday to Friday. Okay. Next thing, again, a very important interview question, and it has been asked a lot of time. How do you pass parameters to Jenkins? So the first thing that you're supposed to do is you're supposed to create a parameterized project. Okay, parameterized project. Okay. And these are what the variables are. Dollar curly bracket browser, dollar curly bracket headless, dollar curly bracket run underscore test on Lambda. These are my Jenkins variable. Okay, and these Jenkins variables are going to be passed to my command. Remember this particular command, right? This is how I am running my Selenium test. Test -d browser, whatever the value of dollar browser will be, that will be given over here. -d is Lambda test. Dollar curly bracket run test on Lambda, whatever will be the value for your run test on Lambda, that will be given over here. And -d is headless. Whatever will be the value of headless that you will be setting over here, we will be passing it off. All right. Now, this particular stuff, if you observe carefully, I have not written over here Maven. Okay, when we were working with your GitHub Actions, I wrote the exact command, Maven test, so on and so forth. But here you're not supposed to do it. In your goal option, you just start with the word test. Okay, because it's a Maven based project, it knows that it's going to be executed via Maven. All right. The next thing that comes into picture is archiving the test results. So over here, I'm archiving a very special file which is called as testng-result.xml file. The name of the file is important. You're supposed to remember this particular file name because see, whatever the test which are going to pass, whatever the test which are going to fail, the exact status report of that entire execution will be available in this testng-result.xml file. So when you are explaining the project, okay, what all things you have done, you're supposed to remember all these things. You're supposed to talk about this thing. This gives the confidence to the interviewer that the candidate has not done any kind of a rote learning. He or she is aware of every single thing that they have done. Make sense? Finally, once everything is done, we will be sending notifications. Okay, the report which is going to be generated, report.html file, right? That I will be sending to the various stakeholders, your developers, the product owner, okay, the testing team, okay. They will be getting this particular execution report, the report.html file, okay, the extent report which we have created. So over here, we have used a special plugin for that, which is the editable email notification. All right. So in this entire Jenkins integration, okay, for your automation framework, in total 4 plugins came into picture. The first one was your, of course, Maven integration plugin. The second one was testng result plugin. You see this archival, right? testng-result.xml file. It's going to create a beautiful dashboard itself on your Jenkins project. So I can log in into Jenkins and I can see that particular result trend, which test is passing, which test is failing, so on and so forth. Another important plugin is testng result analyzer. It gives you more detailed graphical structure, okay, kind of a stuff where you can see which test passed, which test failed. It's up to you whether you want to use it or not. Next is parameterized scheduler. If I want to pass parameters to my cron job here, okay, this cron job, we are passing the parameters, right? Run test on Lambda is actually true over here, right? Headless is false, browser is Chrome. All these things we are passing to our scheduler. How we are able to pass it off? By using this one special plugin, which is parameterized scheduler. When I'm saying plugin, you're supposed to install all these plugin on Jenkins. Remember? All right. So you're supposed to talk about all these things for this particular question. Now, this was the entire diagram. But what would be great over here is if we can just go and cross-check the same thing on our AWS EC2 instance. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly start my Jenkins server. So you can just have a quick recap of how exactly the project setup was done. All right, so let's go over here. All right, guys. So if you see, I have this Jenkins server, and if I go to the right side, this is the key name, Jenkins Telit. So this is the exact Jenkins instance which I used for the Telit assignment. Now, this particular server is stopped right now. Okay. And what I want over here is I want to start this particular server. So what I'll do is I'm just going to right click on the server instance and I'm just going to say start the instance. All right. Now, this particular instance has started now. So, it's going to take a little bit time. Now, the thing over here, guys, is when I created this particular server and we installed Jenkins on this particular server, we are running Jenkins as a service. Meaning, the moment this server is going to be started, okay, or restarted or anything is going to happen to this particular server, Jenkins is automatically going to run. You don't have to log in into the server. You don't have to start the Jenkins by yourself. Is this part clear? Now, over here, this is the public IP address. Now, in your office project, you will definitely have a DNS which will be allocated to this particular server, but we haven't done that part and we don't need to do that part because that is something related to the DevOps or the infra team. Okay, so I want to connect to Jenkins now. So I'll be using this particular IP address, copy this particular IP address, go to a new tab. All right. And on port number 8080, by default, Jenkins is always going to run on port number 8080. So I'm going to hit enter. The moment I hit enter, you will see that it gives me this sign in Jenkins page. It's going to take a little bit time, okay, because this server is just getting started right now. So the performance of the server might be a little bit slow over here. All right. So this particular server has been started and I can see the Jenkins homepage. So I'm just going to say admin, that's the credentials. All right. Hit the sign in button. Now guys, in the test automation framework, I'm just going to click over here. So this test automation framework, guys, this is my Jenkins project. This is where my framework is getting executed, and you will see different what you call as trends which are there. These are basically coming from different plugins which we have used. The first one which you see, the test result trend, okay, this is just giving me the information of whatever the test which is passing, the test failing, all those things. The second one, the test NG result trends. This is basically coming from the plugin that we have used, the test NG result plugin. All right. So we have created this particular dashboard itself with the help of various plugins. So even when someone goes to this particular project on Jenkins, they will be able to come to know which test is passing, which test is failing over here. If you go to the test NG result, or you go to the test NG result analyzer, again there are two different plugins, so I will be able to see which test is passing and failing. So let's click on test NG results. If I click over here, guys, you will see that these are the tests which are failing, these are the tests which have been skipped. All right, so this is the test NG result trend which comes from the test NG plugin. Now, if I go to the test result analyzer, let me click over here. Again, you will see a proper dashboard. Over here, I'm able to see the broken test, how many builds they have failed. Okay, so let's say the add new first address test is failing from build number 1 itself. Okay, so on and so forth. So over here, if I just scroll down, I'll find which tests are passing. So if I just uncheck these things, you will see that total 4 tests are passing, sometimes 3 tests are passing, so on and so forth over here. All right, so you are able to see all these things because of the different plugins that we have installed. Now let's just go with the configuration option. You will first see that there's a build with parameters. So this particular project which we have created, this is actually a parameterized project. So you're supposed to pass different parameters like run test on Lambda. You have to check whether it is going to be executed on Lambda test. If you don't want to execute it on Lambda test, you can just uncheck this part. Do you want to run the test on headless mode? Okay, so and so forth, I can do that part. I can also select the browser on which these tests needs to be executed, right? So over here, guys, this entire project has been parameterized. So we have created this parameterized Maven project in Jenkins. Now let's go to the configure option. All right. So the first thing that I've given over here is description. I just wrote over here what exactly is this project all about. This is more like an optional thing. I would say it's a good practice just so that the people who are using Jenkins, they can understand what exactly is this project all about. Now, how do you configure parameters? That's more important, guys. So over here, guys, if you want to configure parameters or you want to make a parameterized project, you have to check this option called this project is parameterized in Jenkins. Now note that this is a Maven based project. Okay. So we have used a different plugin. All right. So over here, I have this option called this project is parameterized, and this run test on Lambda. This is the variable name. Okay. Now, what kind of a variable is this? This is a Boolean variable, meaning this particular variable can only take the value true or false. So if you are going to check or select that particular checkbox, it is going to be true. So the moment you select the checkbox, it's going to be true. If you don't select it, it's going to be false. And I've just given the description, kind of a label, what exactly is the purpose of this particular variable. Now, one of the practices that you should always remember whenever you are configuring Jenkins is that the name of the variable should always be written in uppercase. This is just a convention, okay? And I would say this is a convention which I follow, because whenever I will be passing parameters or these variables into my script, I want to understand what exactly is this browser signifying. Okay. So I can see dollar curly bracket browser. So it's easier for me to read and understand that this is the variable from Jenkins. Are you getting the point? So I can see dollar curly bracket browser, dollar run test on Lambda, dollar headless. These are all my what? Jenkins variable, or what you call as parameters. Now the second variable which I've created is again headless, which is a Boolean parameter. All right. And the last one that comes into picture is choice parameter. You saw the drop down, right? So browser is going to be kind of a drop down, and you can select what do you want. Do you want to run the test on Chrome, Firefox, or Edge? Okay. So choice parameter is always going to create a drop down. This is the one which you use a lot. Okay. So drop down parameter is going to be something which you will be using a lot, and you can have different parameters also. Like we have given the browser. Next, I can have another choice parameter for environment, where I can give different environments: dev, QA, UAT, right? So I can select those environments also, and I can pass it to my script. Is this part clear? All right. So this is something which is there. Now, the next thing is the source code management. Here I have given the repository URL. Now, guys, this is something which is important. See, most of the time what happens when people are giving interview, they'll put everything. They know GitHub, they know GitLab, they have worked with GitLab runner, so on and so forth. But in your office project, you will either you go with GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. All right. So please make sure whatever the remote repository you're choosing, you are staying consistent to it. All right. You can definitely say that you have done a POC, a proof of concept on GitLab Runner and GitHub Actions, okay, as a side project. All right. But if you put in your resume that you know Jenkins, you have worked on Jenkins in your office project, all right, and then you say you are working on GitHub Actions and GitLab Runner also, that creates a problem. Because in reality, in any office project, there will be one or two maximum CI tools. Okay, if my company is already using Jenkins, the max they will go for GitLab Runner if they have GitLab as a remote repository. So that for a proof of concept, you might have done it. But all the three things doesn't make sense, right? So there is always going to be one remote repository which will be present in any organization. So I just given the remote repository as GitHub itself. Okay, this is my credentials for GitHub, and my code is always going to be present in the master branch. So that's going to be exactly same. I have not changed anything over here. Then over here, build periodically with parameters. This particular stuff is very important. It is not part of Jenkins. I have installed it explicitly. This plugin is parameterized scheduler plugin. You have to install it. Only then you will be able to see this particular option. Okay, the name of the plugin is parameterized scheduler. All right, the first thing, which is TZ equal to Asia Calcutta. What it means? Time zone. So I want this particular project to run at 1729. 5:29 p.m. my time. I am in India, so it has to be Asia Calcutta. All right. Which time zones are supported? You don't need to mug up about the time zone, guys. You can just click on this chap and build periodically. And if you click on this schedule option, you will find the various time zones which are there. So whichever region you belong to, you can just select your respective time zone and put it off over there. Jenkins can give you the guarantee that the project is going to be executed on your time only. If I don't give this particular time zone, then it is going to be executed on the server time. All right. What is the time which is set on the server? Is this part making sense? Now, the next thing is the command. So goals and option, we are executing this particular project as a Maven test, right? So you don't need to write Maven test, just write test. And -d browser, -d is Lambda test, -d is headless. These are all parameters you are passing to Maven. All right. So again, in interview, they can ask, how do you pass parameters to your automation framework? First, you create a parameterized project in Jenkins that we did. And over here in Maven, you can set up the parameters: -d browser, -d is headless, -d is Lambda. All these things will be given to the Maven Surefire plugin, if you remember. And from the Maven Surefire plugin, it is going to come to my test.ng XML file. And from the test.ng XML file, it's going to be given to my test. All right, this is important. Next, publish test.ng result. This comes from the test ng result plugin. You are archiving the test ng hyphen result. All right. Because of this particular stuff only, you are able to see that dashboard, which test is passing, which test is failing. All right. And then in order to send the email, I'm using editable email notification. This is the plugin, editable email notification. It is already installed on Jenkins. Then what you do is you go to advanced option, advanced settings. Then again, go to triggers. In triggers, you will find always. So open this advanced settings or advanced button, just click on that. In the recipient list, just give your email address. If you have one more email address, just give space and start giving the second email address. I can probably give over here, let's say jvsharma18@gmail.com, something like that. Okay. So if I click over here, I can see this is a comma separated list. My bad. You have to separate each of the email by a comma. Okay. It's a comma separated list. So you have to separate it with the help of comma. All right. Let me just zoom in for you guys. There's a comma over here. All right. So whatever the emails that you're supposed to give to multiple people, just comma separated values, just keep on giving it. All right. And over here in the subject, keep it same. If you want to change it, you can change the subject. This is going to be the default message what Jenkins is going to give. And over here, you can just customize. Hi, everyone. Please find attached the report for the automation framework. And in attachment, what I'm giving is the name of the file, report.html, because my file is always going to be present in the root level. All right. So that's something which is there. Okay. And this particular project is going to take a little bit time for setup. So that's it, guys. I hope you have understood how exactly to configure your entire test automation framework with Jenkins. If you are giving interviews, probably you would be. So the thing is, make sure that you always come up with the differences. Which is better? Should I go with Jenkins or should I go with GitHub Actions or GitLab Runner? Now, this particular question is dependent on a lot of things. What kind of remote repository you're using. See, if you are using GitHub, okay, it is better that you go with Actions, of course. All right. If you are going to use GitLab, go with GitLab Runner. I'll say why we don't use Jenkins then. The problem with Jenkins is I have to self-host it by myself. Jenkins is a very good and easy to use CI tool. All right. But the problem with Jenkins comes into picture is that I have to create my own EC2 instance. And then on that EC2 instance, I need to set up Java, I need to set up Maven and all those things. I have to do it by myself. With GitHub Actions and GitLab Runner coming into picture, I can just create my EC2 instance and I can connect it to Actions. Okay. So whatever the executions which are going to happen in your Actions or by Actions, it will be happening on my server if I don't want to execute it on the GitHub virtual machines. So there is always what you call as a benefit that my maintenance for Jenkins application, okay, which I'll be doing in Jenkins is going to be much more lesser in Actions. Okay. I just have to create a YML file and it's going to be taken care. So the problem that comes into picture over here is plugins. A lot of plugins are not available in Actions. The dashboard which I want, like which I get in Jenkins, I'm not going to find it in your GitHub Actions. So there is a trade-off. Okay, if your company prefers that, go with Jenkins. You can definitely go with that. And the only problem will be on the maintenance. I have to make sure that the server does not get full. Okay, because these projects which will keep on getting executed, there will be builds which will be getting created, right? So there is always going to be a chance that my server is going to be full and I have to write a script so that all the old builds get deleted on regular basis. All right. So that's all, guys. I hope this particular part is clear to everyone. Now let's move on to the next question, which is exception handling. Now, guys, the third question is pretty simple. What is exception handling in Java and different exceptions that you have faced in your project? I am pretty sure you will be able to answer what is exception handling in Java if you have studied the exception module from the Java section. But the thing is, for your interviews, you should always remember the different exceptions that have come while you were creating the Java application while you were creating your automation framework. All right. So just for a revision, what exactly is an exception? Exception is basically any unwanted. Remember, exception is an any unwanted or unexpected event that disrupts the normal flow of your program. All right. To ensure the smooth execution of your program, it is necessary to handle exceptions effectively so that system can gracefully handle failure and remain robust. The main advantage or the main reason you want to have exception handling is so that your system is always going to be robust. Okay. So it is going to be something which can handle failure much more gracefully. Okay. That's something that we want to do. Now in Java, exception handling can be done only with two ways. Okay. What are the two ways? Of course, you can read it over here, but what are two ways? One is try catch block and the second is throws keyword, which is the most preferred way of handling exception. Always go with try catch block. Why? Because here I can easily customize the messages. What messages? The exception messages. All right. If you go with throws keyword, the major problem with throw keyword or throws keyword over here is that throws keyword is going to be applicable to a method. It's applicable to a method, and any method which is going to call this M1 method now, okay, needs to handle the exception also. Okay. So if M1 method is going to throw, let's say, file not found exception, even the main method needs to handle the file not found exception, which I feel is not the right thing to do. And I have a very simple philosophy. Probably you might have heard it with your friends also, that if you are facing a problem, okay, if you are having a trouble, if you are doing, you're like, there's something unwanted which is happening in your life, that is your matter. Okay, as simple as that. Okay, you should not put it on someone else. As simple as that. Is this part clear? So if my method is going to create an exception, it should be handled by the method itself. It should not be given to some other method. All right. That's the reason throws is not the right way to handle exception. Though it is one of the way to handle exception, it is not the preferred choice. Always go with try catch. All right. Now, if the interviewer is asking about exception handling, they can talk about the various try catch block structure which is there. Okay. Can a try exist without a catch? Yes or no? Can I have a try without a catch block? Yes, no, no. Yes, we can have a try without a catch block. So if I'm going to have a try without a catch block, okay, I need to also have a finally block coming into picture. Yes or no? Do you remember? Do you remember? Finally will definitely come into picture. All right. Then a try can have multiple catch block also. Then you can have finally block coming into picture. Now, one more thing over here is they can ask about a very special interface which is called as auto closable. Do you remember this word? Auto closable. All right. This is kind of a topic, a kind of a very important interface. Okay. And with this particular interface, guys, you don't need to close your resources. All right. So if you're trying to read a file, if you're trying to read any kind of a, like an Excel reader, or you're trying to read a CSV and all, you really don't need to have this, those respective resources be closed by yourself in the finally block. Okay. You can do it with the help of try catch with resources. Try catch with resources. So try catch with resources implements auto closable interface. So over there, I don't need to use the finally block. Acha, what is the purpose of finally block? Okay. Generally, what are you going to put inside a finally block? Yes. Finally block is going to be executed no matter whether the try block was executed completely or not. So finally block is always meant to close resources. All right. When you go with try catch with resources, you don't need finally block because auto closable is going to close all your resources automatically. Is this part clear to everyone? Please remember this particular word. What is auto closable? If you don't remember it, please make a note of that particular point. Go to the exception handling and watch that particular lecture. Is this part clear? Perfect. Now, let's just read ahead. The most ideal way to handle exception is using try catch block because it allows you to provide custom exception messages and implement specific recovery logic for different scenarios. Now, as I've said that they are talking about exception handling, they will definitely ask about the different exceptions that you have faced in your project. Now, most of the time, people will only talk about Java exceptions or Selenium exceptions coming into picture. But what I've done over here is I've kept the list of all the exceptions that you might face while working on your UI automation framework, API automation framework, your mobile automation framework, so on and so forth. All right. So I don't want to technically go through these exception names, but just for the sake of this particular question, if you're talking about API automation framework, so you're doing API testing, particularly with REST assured. So the kind of exceptions that can come into picture is connect timeout exception. The request timeout while attempting to connect to the server. Okay. So if I'm trying to make an API request, okay, and if that particular server is down, okay, I'm gonna get connect timeout exception. Next, socket timeout exception. The server did not respond within the expected time. So if your application is bit slow, okay, the response time of the server is coming on a very on a like less than whatever is a threshold which has been kept, you will get a socket timeout. So probably they can always ask what is the difference between a connection timeout and a socket timeout. Okay, in the socket timeout, the server is not down. It is just not performing at an optimum speed right now. So there is going to be an infrastructure issue which is happening right now. The configuration of the server is not that strong. All right. Next is connection refused exception. All right, connection refused. The API endpoint is unreachable. Example, server is down or the incorrect URL. All right. Connection refused is only going to come into picture, let's say, when your URL itself is incorrect, meaning your server is down. Okay, if the server is not down, the endpoint which I have given does not exist. So it's going to give me connection refused. Please make a note of all these 3 points. So these are going to be the connection exceptions coming into picture. Please remember these exceptions. Again, I'm saying, okay, I'm not telling you guys to mug up. But remember, at least 10-15 exceptions somewhere down the lane, because the more you practice, you will keep on remembering these. Achha, this exception comes into picture. This is the reason this exception comes. That's all. All right. And you're supposed to talk about these exceptions. Okay. In interview, you're supposed to talk about these exceptions. Then is invalid response exception. The API returned an unexpected or an invalid response. JSON processing exception. Error parsing the response JSON to the desired object. See, this particular stuff is going to come into picture when your JSON, okay, which you are trying to parse with the help of JSON or Jackson is not correct. So JSON processing exception can come into picture. HTTP client error exception indicates that there is going to be a client error. That is, you're getting a 4XX, okay, 401, 404 exceptions or status code over here. Next, HTTP server error exception. This is going to come into picture when there is some issue with the server, 5XX. All right. These two are pretty simple, HTTP client error exception and HTTP server error exception. Client error will always come whenever you are going to have, let's say, any status code which is going to start with 4. HTTP server error exception is going to come into picture whenever you're going to have any status code that starts with 5. Clear? Invalid header exception, missing or invalid headers which are present in the request. All right. Next, authentication and authorization exceptions. Unauthorized exception, forbidden exception, token got expired exceptions. So these are pretty straightforward. Unauthorized exception basically means your credentials are incorrect. Forbidden exception meaning you don't have that access to that particular API. Token expired exception, your bearer token, your JWT token got expired. All right. These are the list of exceptions that you might face when you're working with Rest Assured. All right. Can I go ahead? UI testing exceptions. Okay. No such element. You are not able to find the element with the respected XPath in your DOM. Next, element not visible exception. Element is present, but the element is not visible. It is hidden from the DOM right now or in the DOM right now. Stale element exception. The element is no longer attached to the DOM. Alright. Timeout exception. This is going to come into picture whenever you are working with WebDriver wait. When you start working with waits, right, you get timeout exception. Okay. The element or the condition did not load within the specified exception. Invalid selector exception. The provided XPath or CSS, the structure of XPath or CSS is incorrect. Then you're going to get this invalid selector exceptions. More or less, these are the common exceptions that you'll always face. Okay, just to repeat it one more time for you guys. So over here, no such element exception, meaning whatever the locator you have given, that particular element is not there in the DOM. Next, element not visible exception. Element is present on the page, but it is not visible yet, meaning it is part of the DOM, but it is not shown to you right now. What can be an element which is present on the page but not shown to you? Pop-ups, modals. Have you seen those modals? When you click on the sign in button, only then that pop-up comes into picture, that element is shown. That is what you call as visibility and invisibility. It's invisible unless you click on a button. All right. Next, stale element reference exception. So the element which you are trying to refer is not attached to the DOM right now. Okay, stale basically means old. The locator is kind of an old right now. Makes sense? So that's where stale element exception comes into picture. Timeout exception, whenever you will work with WebDriver wait, okay, the WebDriver wait waited for X amount of time for the element to be loaded on the page. It did not load. You're going to get your timeout exception. Next, invalid selector exception. Whenever there is going to be an issue with your XPath or CSS, whatever the XPath and CSS you have written, if it is incorrect, the structure is incorrect, you're going to get invalid selector exception. Is this part clear to everyone? Perfect. The next one over here is browser session issue. If the session is not getting created, issue starting a browser session. Generally, this happens whenever there is going to be a Chrome driver and the Chrome browser version mismatch. You will get this session not created. Make a note of this particular point. This is a common exception a lot of time people face. When you get this exception, session not created, it is going to be because of your Chrome driver and Chrome browser version mismatch. They are not compatible with each other. That's the reason. WebDriver exception, generic exception for WebDriver error. Element click intercepted exception. Now, this exception I'm pretty sure you might have seen a lot of time. Element click intercepted exception. So this particular exception comes whenever an element is blocked from being clicked due to overlays. Okay, there is a layer, like how exactly elements are placed one inside the other. There's a nesting which is happening. So whenever you get the element click intercepted exception, the only way to solve this particular exception is to use the correct what you call the locator, something that can be performed as a click. All right, the locator has to be correct. If your locator is incorrect, then you will definitely get this element click intercepted exception. Unhandled alert exception, unexpected modal or dialog or alert box appearing. All right, then these are the common exceptions. Then you have your assertion error, verification steps fails, comparison failure, expected and actual values are having a mismatch. These are all your test ng issues or test ng exceptions coming into picture. File and data issue, file not found exception. We have seen a lot of time. IO exception, okay, you are not able to read or write into the file. Okay. These are the exceptions from your Selenium WebDriver. Okay, I'm not telling you to mug up all these things, but please make sure whatever the exception names you're gonna take, okay, out of this list, Remember the purpose of those exceptions. Why exactly those exceptions are going to come into picture. Next, mobile testing exceptions, element interaction. Okay, no such element exceptions. We are talking about APM over here. All right. Element not interactable exception, invalid element state exception. It's kind of similar to that of your web driver. All right. Next, device or app issues are going to be there. You're going to get app not installed exception, invalid session ID, activity not found. All right. So these are all the exceptions that you will find in APM, and they're kind of similar to that of your Selenium also. All right. So you'll be able to understand it the moment you start reading these exceptions and what exactly the reason for these exceptions are going to be. All right. Then gesture, whatever you call it, gestures and scrolling issues, touch action error, scroll timeout exception. Touch action error, failure during a swipe, tap, or other gestures. So you will face a touch action error if you're not able to perform a touch, a tap, or like a swipe on your emulator. That time you're gonna get this exception. All right. Scroll timeout exception. Scrolling operation did not complete within the expected time. All right. Then there's a network issues, network connection, remote endpoint. So you can just go through these exceptions and it's going to be pretty fine. Common framework level exceptions, null pointer exception, attempting to access an object that is not created, null. Illegal state exception. The method was invoked at an inappropriate time or state. Class cast exception, this is important. You might have faced it during your JSON and Jackson also. Incorrect typecasting in the framework code. Configuration exception, issue with configuration file, example missing environment variables or incorrect steps. Okay. Data provider exception, whenever you are trying to read the data from the data provider, okay, and if the data provider structure is incorrect or the format is incorrect, then you're going to find this data provider exception, which is a test ng exception. All right. So these are some common exceptions. These are related to Java, like test ng, various libraries. I've just kept it for you guys. You can just go through them, just try to recollect the exceptions, okay, for your interview. You don't really need to mug up all, okay. You need to know this and that. No, just know 10, 15 and you're good to go. All right. Because the thing is, the more you work on a project, right, automatically these exceptions you will be able to remember it off. Now, me showing all these exceptions in front of you guys, that does not make sense, right? So these are the list of exceptions that will come into picture whenever you're working with frameworks or writing code or you're creating a test automation framework. These exceptions will bound to come into picture. All right. All right. Quickly go through this particular answer one more time, guys, before we move on to the next one. Read the exception handling. Whatever the green points which are written over there, those are the important things that you're supposed to be aware of. Just remember the exception names. Okay, couple of the exception name that you can, if you want to remember it off. Okay, that will be more than enough for you guys. All right, quickly read it and then we'll move on to the next one. Now this next question, guys, it has been asked again a lot of time. Generally, this is going to be a theoretical question only. They want to understand your knowledge on Agile methodology. Okay, so how well do you know Agile? Okay, how well do you know Sprint and the different ceremonies? Ceremonies basically means the different meetings that happen when you work in an Agile environment, particularly when you are following Scrum. All right. So what I've done over here is I have just written few points about Agile and Scrum. I want you guys to read it. Can you quickly do that part? All right, I hope you have read about Agile and Scrum. Let me just explain you in nutshell what exactly Agile and Scrum is. See, Agile is basically a software development methodology. Okay, it's a way of developing softwares which focuses on iterative development. Instead of developing the whole software in one go, okay, team decides or company decides that it's always better to release in features in small iteration. One of a simple example of software development I can give you is Instagram. If you see Instagram, how it was 10 years or 15 years way back, it was just a photo sharing app, right? Now, if you observe, you can do video call, you can chat with people, there are videos, reels, right? You can comment, you can create groups over there, right? You can go live. So a lot of things are there, and this has happened over a period of time. Okay, no one knows how exactly the application is going to be created in one go. I don't know how exactly this lecture is going to be created by the end. So we always break it down into smaller parts. Make sense? So once a part is completed, we see what is the feedback we are getting from the customer. Then according to that, we try to fix it, or we are trying to make new changes according to that. So over here, guys, Agile is basically software or development methodology focused on iterative development, collaboration, flexibility, and delivering small and incremental changes frequently to ensure continuous improvement and adaptability to changing requirement. Is this part clear to everyone? In simple terms, I have to explain you. Perfect. Now, there are different models using which Agile framework can be achieved. You can go with Scrum, which is very popular for your development. You can go with Kanban, extreme programming, lean software development, and safe. All right. So these are the different agile frameworks which are present. Now, whenever you are going to work in an IT or you're going to work in any project, chances are they will always go for Scrum. Now, over here, guys, what is Scrum? Scrum is an agile framework that organizes work into smaller time-boxed iteration called sprint. Now, what is sprint? See, when I say you are going to have 1 week, 1 week is how many days? Yes, 7 days. So, week is more like a unit. So, whenever we're going to say 1 week, you know that 7 days are going to come into picture. So, sprint is also kind of a unit where you can customize how exactly a sprint is going to be. In most of the organization, a sprint is always going to be of 2 weeks. 2 weeks is how much? Monday to Friday. Monday to Friday. So, this is 5 days. This is 5 days. So, 10 days is one sprint. And in a month, you work for 4 weeks, right? So 20 days constitute to 2 sprint. So generally in a month, you always work on 2 sprint, and during those 20 days, guys, you and the development team will work on a specific set of tasks or user stories. These user stories or tasks will be completed in 20 days, which is going to result into a potentially shippable product. Okay, something that can be released off into the market. All right. So by the end of that sprint, something needs to be released into the production. Is this part clear to everyone? Perfect. Now, talking about the various ceremonies or the meetings that are going to be there in your sprint, all right, or in your agile, is first is sprint planning. All right. Then is going to be daily stand up, sprint review, sprint retrospective, and backlog refinement. All right. Make a note of all these 5 meetings: sprint planning, daily stand up, sprint review, sprint retrospective, and backlog refinement. These are the 5 meetings that happen whenever you are working in Agile, particularly when you say that you're going to work in sprint or you are following Scrum framework. All right. So each sprint, these 5 meetings are bound to happen. Is this part clear? Perfect. Now let's try to understand about each of these ceremonies, each of these meetings in detail. Now guys, when we're talking about sprint planning basically defines the sprint goal. What are you going to complete in the upcoming sprint? Prioritize the work and plan the task for upcoming sprint. All right. So over here, we have to define, okay, the product owner will be there, the developer will be there, okay, the testing team is going to be there, plus the scrum master is also going to be there. They all are going to sit together, decide what exactly they want to achieve in the current or the upcoming sprint which is going to happen. They have to prioritize the work. Okay, you might be given like 5 6 tasks. Out of those 5 6 tasks, which is the first task which is of highest importance you are supposed to do? All right, and you have to plan the task for the upcoming sprint. Is this part clear? So what you will be achieving in the next 10 days, that is one sprint, that is what is the sprint planning all about. The key activities that are going to happen during the sprint planning meeting is: select user stories from the backlog, the product backlog. This product backlog, guys, will be created by whom? The product owner. From the product backlog, the sprint task or the user stories are selected for the upcoming sprint, and they are going to be distributed among the team. Break down stories into smaller tasks. So if I have to complete a user stories, what all tasks which are associated with that, they will be created and they will be assigned to various team members. Estimate effort and assign responsibility. How much effort will be required? Okay, who is going to work on a particular task? All these things will be decided during the sprint planning. Is this part clear to everyone? Perfect. Great. Next thing, the outcome, a sprint backlog and a clear understanding for deliverables. What needs to be delivered in the next 10 days, they are going to be clearly defined during the sprint planning. Is this part clear? Perfect. Next part, daily scrum, or what you call as daily stand-up meetings. The purpose of the daily stand-up meeting is to provide daily updates on progress, identify blockers, okay, and plan the day work. The key activities of the daily scrum is: the team members, the developer, tester, the scrum master, and whoever is the part of your team, they need to answer these many questions. What did you do yesterday before you left for home? Was the task completed? Okay, did you complete the task? Was there any kind of a blocker? And what exactly you're going to do today? That's the only thing that will be discussed in the stand-up meeting. Stand-up meeting, we call it a stand-up meeting because it is supposed to be short meeting. All right. So it has to quickly end so that there is a complete transparency of what you are doing, what I am doing, and what the other person in my team is doing. There is a complete transparency of that. All right. And if there is any kind of a blocker, so we need to help each other to resolve that particular issue as quickly as possible. Is this part clear to everyone? This is all daily scrum. Okay, it's pretty simple, right? The outcome is team alignment and quick problem solving. The next is sprint review. Purpose: to showcase completed work to stakeholders and gather feedback. The key activity that is going to happen during your sprint review meeting is: demonstrate deliverable, discuss what was completed and what wasn't, collect input for future improvement. Outcome: stakeholder engagement and validation of deliverables. Now, over here, guys, see, if you are an automation tester, what will be your deliverables? First, your automation test scripts. So you have to demonstrate how exactly your test scripts are going to work. So if you have integrated your framework with your CI and then there are new test scripts which have been added over there, you have to execute that entire test scripts in CI and then show them the test reports. All right. So those things will be checked. What are you testing in that particular test scripts? All those things will be discussed and demonstrated during the sprint review meeting. Is this part clear? Perfect. The next thing over here, guys, is your sprint retrospective. Retrospective basically serves a purpose to reflect on the sprint process and identify area of improvements. So once your sprint is coming to a closure, like it's getting closed now, okay, you have to discuss with your team members what went right and what went wrong. Was there any way we could have expedited the entire sprint deliverables? All right. Let's say if I had taken two tasks or if two tasks was assigned to me and I was able to complete it early, right? So I don't have any task for the sprint then. So it basically means that I was not assigned the work properly. All right. My estimation was also wrong. Is this part clear? Or if there was a task which was given to me and I was not able to complete in the sprint, then it is going to go again into the backlog. I have to take it again in the next sprint. So meaning there was a underestimation for that particular task. The task was a complex task. We did not understand the blockers which were coming in the way. So the planning went wrong. All right. All those things we need to discuss it off. So we will discuss what went well, what didn't, and what could have been improved. Create actionable items for the next sprint. Outcome, continuous improvement and enhanced team performance. That is the goal of your sprint retrospective meetings. The next one over here is backlog refinement. It's optional, but it is kind of a recommended for better performance in your agile development and in order to perform your sprint properly. The purpose of backlog refinement is to prepare and prioritize backlog for future sprint. Okay. The key activities that are going to come into picture is clarify the user stories, add details, estimates and priorities. And the outcome of backlog refinement is a well-defined backlog ready for your sprint planning. And you know who is going to do it? The product owner. All right. The product owner is responsible for your backlog refinement, not us. All right. He or she can take input from us, but majorly they need to define how exactly the entire backlog refinement is going to happen. Is this part clear to everyone? All right. So these are the various ceremonies, different meetings that happen in your agile. So please remember these meetings, these ceremonies for your interview also. All right. So I have written over here the purpose, the key activities and the outcomes. You need to remember all these things for your interview. Perfect. Please go through it. Then we will discuss the last question, which is write a program to count the total characters in a string without using the dot length method. All right. So this was the last question which was asked to the candidate. Okay. We have to calculate the total characters in a string without using the dot length method. All right. So I hope you have gone through the previous question, that is of your sprint ceremonies, your agile ceremonies. Now let's try to write some code over here. Now over here guys, this particular question, which is write the program to count the total characters in a string without using the dot length method. This is the exact same problem which I have covered in the logic building. If you have solved the logic building properly, you would have faced this particular question. All right. So this is, I would say, an important interview question. But now in 2025, okay, I will say that the quality of questions, okay, they are going to be a little bit difficult. They are going to be a little bit new. All right. So it's important to know about the various string methods. But at the same time, guys, your major assessment is going to happen on projects. You have to create projects. You have to explain the projects in the interview. Remember the Tenet assignment? Something like that will, I assume, is going to happen. All right. Couple of days back, like a student of mine, she was giving interview for browser stack. There was a proper assessment. She had to create a complete automation framework and she had to submit that part. I will definitely add that solution also into this interview preparation. But please make sure that don't mug up code. Okay, your major focus should be to write clean code. You need to understand various design patterns. You need to understand various libraries and how you're going to use them in your project. You need to be comfortable with object-oriented programming. All right, that's the reason the entire course is created in a way that you get comfortable with the entire Java concept, the OOP concept, so on and so forth. So please make sure you study properly. The interview preparation is created so that you are able to give interviews fast. You are able to get that confidence that I know these many questions, I'll be able to answer it off. But does it give you the exact knowledge, the whole knowledge of your entire tech stack? The answer is no. All right. I always say that giving interviews is a different thing. Learning is altogether a different stuff. So you have to create a proper system that I'll be studying 1 hour daily. Interview preparation, even if you study for, let's say, alternate days and all those stuff, you will be prepared for the interviews in 15-20 days. All right. Anyways, back to this particular question, guys. So here it is written that the input string is hello world. Okay. So I have been given a string. let's say the string over here is input, and over here the value or input string is hello world. Now we have to tell the length of the string. What is length of the string? Length of the string is the total number of characters which are there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Space is also characters. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So the output of this particular program should be 11. But the thing is, we are not supposed to use the dot length method. Is this part clear? You're not supposed to use the dot length method. So how I can do that part? See, when you're working with string, like you are aware of different string methods. Let me ask you something. Can I convert this particular string into a character array? Yes. Can we convert it into a character array or to an array? The answer is yes. I can use something like 2 character array. Okay. Which is, that is input dot 2 character array, and it's going to give me a character array. Okay. Let's call this as input character. This is going to be that array. Okay. Then you're going to get something like this now. H E L L O space is also a character. Then W O R L, okay, D. And this input character reference is pointing to this array. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These are the indexes. Now, there is a length property in your array also. I can say input character dot length. Okay. And it will give me the total number of elements which are there inside this array, which is going to be 11, which is going to be the length of the string, right? But let's say interviewer say ki you are not supposed to use the dot length property also. Then what I'm going to do? Then what we will do is we will traverse this array. You know traversing, right? Traveling the entire array, going to each memory location, okay, from 0 to the last index. So over here, guys, we will traverse this particular array with a simple for each loop, of course. I can just take a simple for each loop for input character, okay. Input character store character elements. So I'll be creating a character dummy variable, okay. But I'm not going to use this particular character dummy variable, okay. It's just going to have this particular element inside it. What we will do is we will create another variable. Let's call this particular variable as int count. And count will be initialized with 0. All right. Now, the moment this particular for each loop is going to be executed, your count will be incremented. Your count will be incremented. So what is going to happen? For the first element, okay, C is going to store H inside it. It's going to go inside. It's going to increment count. Count is going to become 1. Then I'm going to get the next character. Again, count is going to be incremented. It's going to become 2. Then you're going to get the third character, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. You will be getting all the elements from this particular array, right? So in total, you know how many elements you will be traversing? 11 elements. That is the length of the string. Is this part clear to everyone? Okay. So once this particular for each loop is going to be completed, you are just going to print your count and you're done. Is this part clear to everyone? Simple question, pretty simple. Okay. And as I said, this particular question was asked from Accenture. So I don't think this particular question can come again, but hey, even if it comes, now you know how to write the program, right? So what I want you guys to do is, once you have understood the entire logic, guys, start writing the code by yourself. All right. I've just explained you one way of solving this particular program. There's also another way. You can go to the logic building and you can check the second solution also over there. All right. So please pause this particular video, start writing the code. I will be writing the code at the end of this particular lecture. All right. Quickly complete it off by yourself first. If you get stuck somewhere, only then watch the video. All right, guys, I hope you were able to write the code for the length of the string without using the dot length method. Let's quickly write the same, okay, just so that you can compare the code. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first create a class. Let's call this as count characters. Okay. And this particular class is going to have a main method inside it. And we will create the input string also. So this is going to be string input. Acha, whenever you are writing code, okay, particularly for your interview, na, always explain it off. Okay, you don't just start writing the code because the interviewer is over there, right? He or she wants to understand how do you think for a particular problem. So whenever you are writing the code, every line you try to explain it off. Make sense? So over here, string input is hello world. Now, what I can do is, of course, I don't want to use the dot length method. So the first thing, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to store or I'm going to convert this input string into 2-character array, which is very obvious. All right. And because of this, I will be getting, okay, a character array. So I'm going to call this as input array, square bracket. Then I'm going to create a count variable, which is going to hold the character count, okay, which character we have traversed. The only reason this particular array is created so that we can traverse the array. All right. So individual memory location. So I'm just going to say for input array, one by one, I'll be getting the character elements from this particular array. So I'm going to create a dummy variable called character temp. We are not going to use this particular temp. Okay. It's of no use to us. But I will be incrementing the count. It's going to look something like this. Once this particular for each loop is completed, all you do is you print count. That's all. Control Shift F, fix the formatting. Control S, save this particular file. Click on the play button. And if it's not wrong, 11 is the answer. There are 11 characters. But let's say the interviewer say you're not supposed to use the character array. Okay. Then what you're going to do? You're not supposed to convert this particular string into a character array. Then how you're going to solve it? The second solution which I've kept in the logic building. All right. What we will do is we will not convert it into character array. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called input dot character at. Okay. And it requires index. Now, of course, I know that the index is always going to start from 0. So over here, guys, I will create a variable called count. Okay, count will be initialized with 0 and I can put away a count. Now, see, if count is 0, definitely I'll be getting some character on the 0th index. Okay, now let's say if I put away 20, if there is a character at the 20th index, I will get that. But if it is not there, you are going to get an exception. Okay. You're going to get an exception. String index out of bound exception. So I can be sure that it is definitely one character, meaning 0th index is there. So there's definitely one character, but it is definitely less than 20. Then let's say I try 15. Click on the play button. No, your character at 15th index is also not available, meaning the length is definitely less than 14, okay, or 15, whatever it is. So over here, let's say I go with 10. Click on the play button. Program runs. Meaning we started from the 0th index. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? In total, 11 memory locations we have covered. So the length of this particular array should be 11. All right. We generally go with this kind of approach also. So I don't know how many indexes are there. Count is going to take care of the index for us. Okay. So I'm going to put over here 0. Now, what we will do is we will run it again and again, again and again. We'll try to get the character at a particular index. But I don't know, right, how much memory locations are there or what is the size of the array, right? So over here, we will keep on doing it. True. Keep on doing again and again. Okay, while to keep on doing this part. Okay, I'm going to say try to do this. Okay, and I will increment the count also. Catch. If there's a try, there is also going to be a catch coming into picture. Now, which exception we were getting? String index out of bound exception. Okay. So what I'm going to do, if I am getting exception, I will just print count. That's all. Sorry. I'm just going to print count. That's all. So if I'm going to click on the play button, you see I'm getting 11, 11, 11 printed again and again, again and again. So what I want is, I want to exit from this particular loop also, right? It keeps on getting executed. So what I will do now, I will break from the loop. So it's going to print count, that is 11, and then it is going to break from the loop. And tada, we got the length of the string. That is, there are 11 characters which are present in this particular string. The length of the string is 11. Is this part clear to everyone? Perfect. Great. Practice the second solution. Okay. Chances are your interviewer will first reject this particular solution because he'll be like, array are using 2-character array. That's the program becomes very trivial, right? It's very basic then. But this particular solution will definitely he or she will accept. All right. So that's it for this particular interview preparation lecture, guys. I hope you enjoyed it off. You studied all the questions thoroughly, and I really hope that you are ready for your next interview. All right. If you want me to cover any questions, you can put it in the discussion section of this particular video. Please make sure you keep the company name. Along with that, you give me the list of questions that they have asked for, so that it becomes easier and people can really, like believe that these are the questions which have been asked. All right. So that's it now. I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. Please don't forget to mark your attendance for this particular lecture now. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.